Hey, how's it going, guys? This is Joe and Tell. Today we're going to be talking about the Monolith M-OW1 on-wall speaker. Another on-wall speaker. This one right here. So first of all, I need to mention that Monolith is a channel sponsor. They did send these free for me to review, and I am allowed to say whatever I want. I really do like working with Monolith because they just keep coming out with hit after hit, and it's just really easy for me to review because all of their stuff as of right now has measured very well. They performed really well, and this OW1 is not an exception to that. Now, previously I reviewed some other on-wall speakers, and I mentioned that there are always compromises. So people who want an on-wall speaker are probably getting it because they care about the decor, their interior design. They don't want speakers on the floor. Maybe they can't cut holes in the wall for in-wall speakers. There's always a compromise. Floor standing speakers will give you more bass, but they take up more space. I rhymed. In-wall speakers don't have the issue of a boundary effect where the sounds coming from the back cancel the sounds going to the front, but you have to cut holes in your wall. On-wall speakers don't take up floor space. You don't have to cut holes in your wall, but typically because they have to be thin, they don't usually have a lot of bass. Looking at this, it does look like a multiple driver design, and sometimes there's issues with something like an MTM design where there's a mid-range tweeter in the middle and another mid-range. This is not that, and so it is able to overcome some of the other issues with regards to how you have to have these placed. These are currently $4.99 a pair, and they do come in this matte black finish, which I think looks nice. The dimensions here are 7 inches across, 16.1 inches high, and 3.5 inches deep. Now, I mentioned that this looks like a multiple driver design, and it looks like that, but it's actually only one active woofer here. These are passive radiators. So this is the only driver that has a magnet and has wires connected going to your amplifier. These don't have any magnet behind them. Another trick that they have up their sleeve is that this is a concentric, meaning that what you see in the middle is actually a tweeter. This is a 0.78 inch tweeter with a neodymium magnet, and the polypropylene cone here acts kind of like a waveguide for the tweeter. What you see flanking both sides are two 4.5 inch passive radiators that act to extend the bass response. One thing that's interesting is that these have inverted surrounds, and that's not typical. It's not something that you see every day. Kind of curious why they went that route. These do come with a magnetic grill cover, and the logo rotates depending on whether you have it vertically or horizontally. If you look on the back, you will see a 5-way binding post, and so you can use your banana plugs on these. One issue I had with previous on-wall speakers is that there's not enough room behind it to use banana plugs because they actually touch the wall before the actual back of the speaker does. What they've done is they've kind of recessed this a little bit more, and so it looks like there might be enough room there for banana plugs. Another thing that I really like, and it shows that they put a lot of thought into this, is they made a little cutout here for the cables. The cables are not gonna make this sit further than it needs to be. This is all genius. It works together with this wall mount that is also recessed, so nothing actually sticks out the back of this. When they say 3.5 inches, that's actually 3.5 inches away from the wall, including all the mounting hardware. That does have some benefits because in addition to it sitting flush, that reduces the max profile. And also there's no gap behind there. I'm not sure if that helps it frequency response wise. I have a feeling that it might. So I did measure these, and they had an impressive response on axis as well as off axis. And so you can see here, yeah, I'm happy with how these respond. I've said before that these companies have speakers that are EQable. And so I'm always happy when you have speakers that just don't really need a ton of EQ out of the box. Now, all speakers can use some EQ to improve the sound, but I'm always happy when a speaker sounds good out of the box, and these do. This does have a pretty narrow baffle, meaning the distance between the edge of this cone and the outside of this front baffle is not very large. So it's not like you have a wide cabinet. I think that does affect things with regards to the cancellation that happens. So you can use these in any orientation, vertically or horizontally, and because this is acting as a point source, meaning that the mid-range or mid-woofer and the tweeter, all the sound is coming from the same actual location, as opposed to most speakers where you have an active woofer and then you may have a tweeter up here. And what happens is if you go off axis above it, you're closer to the tweeter than you are to the woofer, and so it starts affecting the frequency response. Here, it doesn't matter if you're above, to the side, you're getting pretty much the same response. And let's take a look at the measurements, and you'll see that if I have it vertically like this and you go off axis this way 45 degrees, this is the response you get. Very respectable. If you want to use this as a center channel, you're going to have to put the speaker this way. And so what's important is what happens when you move side to side off axis. So this angle here, 45 degrees here, how does that sound? How does that measure? Here it is right here. And again, not very different. And that is one of the key differences between this and other on-wall speakers. I think it's very smart that they used a concentric design. Real slick that they use the passive radiators, and I'll explain in a minute. One thing I want to mention is that these are THX Compact certified. What that means is if you're listening from an 8-foot distance or in a room that's about 1,000 square feet, so think 10 foot by 11 foot by 9 foot room, approximately, pretty small room, then THX says, you know, these speakers will play loud enough without distortion. They don't tell exactly what they use to rate and certify, but I have a feeling it has a lot to do with distortion limits and SPL characteristics. In other words, it has to play loud enough without sounding like crap. That also means that you shouldn't expect to play these super loud in a large room. Now, as far as bass response, I was impressed because these were getting down to about 85 Hertz when I was measuring the active driver. And when I measured the passive radiators, they were getting down to about 77 Hertz. And that is really the sweet spot. As long as this can get below 80 Hertz, to me, that is important because that's where I like to cross over my subwoofers. 80 Hertz is around the location where you can no longer localize bass. And so you want that handoff from your subwoofers to your speakers to be seamless. And that occurs around the 80 Hertz frequency. Not exactly, but it's generally where people like to cross over. Now, another thing that I think is very smart is this is only one active woofer. Even though it looks like two other ones are here, they're just there to enhance the bass. They're acting kind of like ports. And so that's really smart because this whole internal volume is only for that one driver, as opposed to having to share the internal space with the magnets from the other woofers. You know, they all have their own requirements. They would all have to have their own internal volume, whereas this whole space is just for this one 4.5-inch mid-bass driver. And so I think that's how they're able to get even better bass response from a relatively small cabinet. Now, Hoffman's iron law always states that you can have either deep bass extension, a small driver, or sensitivity. You can't have it all. And so they've given you some bass extension. They've made it a small package. What you sacrifice is the sensitivity. These are 84.4 dB sensitive, and they are 4 ohm speakers. And a lot of people ask, can I drive these? And you know what I would say is these are made for a small room. If you're using a pretty decent AVR, something kind of recent, I think you shouldn't have a problem playing these at pretty loud volumes, especially because you're going to be crossing these over with a subwoofer at around 80 Hertz. It won't require the crazy bass notes that'll really stress out the amplifier. It's not something that I would necessarily worry about unless you're using a really old or not a very good AVR. So as a summary, I think that these are going to be good, whether you want to use them as a left, center, or right speaker, so your entire front stage. If you wanted to use these, I would say, hey, go for it. If you want to use them as your surrounds or rear surrounds or height speakers, I think that would also work. Voice of God, they can pretty much do it all except for subwoofer duty. Luckily, Monolith sells some subs. If you wanted to pair this up with any of the Monolith THX subs, I think you would have a pretty awesome system. I need to reiterate that these I can easily recommend as a center channel, even if you place it horizontally, just because they perform very well, regardless of if you're above, below, left and right. As long as you're within a reasonable listening window and not way too far off axis, you should get a pretty consistent frequency response. Now, some nitpicks with this, I would say that on walls are going to be for people who really care about the aesthetics. They are making all kinds of sacrifices, not having floor standing speakers. They can't do in walls. And so these are going to be okay if you have a dark theater. But I'm thinking that if you have a dedicated theater with dark walls, you probably can do in walls, or you probably have some bigger speakers anyway. I think it would be a good idea on their part to come out with some that are white and have maybe different grill combinations to match your interior decor. I think that would be a smart move on their part. But who am I? I'm very impressed with the bass response. I'm impressed with the fact that they've resolved some of the off-axis inconsistencies by using a concentric driver. It also seemed to have less interference with the nearby boundary effect. And so it's something that goes along with on-wall speakers. Like I said at the beginning, you have sounds bouncing off the back wall and reflecting and canceling out with the sounds coming forward. And so here I'm looking at the dip and you do see it, but it's not as deep as some of the other speakers that I've seen. I'm not sure exactly how they did that. I think it has something to do with the fact that the depth is only 3.5 inches on this. There's not a ton of space between the driver and the outside baffle. There's no space behind it. It sits right flush against the wall. All these factors, I think, contribute to it not having such a bad effect. And yeah, I don't know. I think that's pretty amazing. So in my main theater, I'm using Monolith Encore speakers as my center, my floor standing speakers, and my surrounds. And I'm kind of curious to see how well these would sound maybe as my front heights or maybe as a center height. I don't know. I think tonally it would match. What do you guys think? It got me to thinking, what if they didn't have to use passive radiators and they just use this mid-range driver in its own separate smaller enclosure? That might be really cool for height speakers. As long as they can get it down to that 80 hertz, I'm not sure. Before I put these on the speaker leaderboard, I should say that these do have a 5-year warranty. They have a 30-day money-back guarantee in case you want to try them out. And Monolith has also sent me something else that will be in a future review. It's this thing right here. This thing. Monolith actually has a pretty nice unboxing experience considering that this is $4.99 a pair, not very expensive. They come with white gloves. You know, it has this bag, so you undress the speaker kind of. All right, there it is. The M-OW1. It's basically 3 of the OW1s in one enclosure. So I'm not sure if this is supposed to be a soundbar replacement, if it's supposed to be an LCR or maybe both. You guys will have to wait for an upcoming review. And yeah, we'll see what this thing is all about. Excited to try it out. In case you're wondering, each driver here has its own terminal. That thing's pretty heavy. I'm tired of carrying that. Whew, out of breath. So this is much more manageable. The OW1, let's put it on the speaker leaderboard. All right, so here we are at the speaker leaderboard. We have the Monolith M-OW1. Currently, these are $4.99 a pair. And so best under $500. I'm gonna put them somewhere around here. So it's right here below the JBL 306P, which are active speakers, and these are accurate. I just didn't like the hiss on those. They are above the AI41s just because I think that these are actually more accurate than those. The AI41s probably have a little bit more bass, but it's just that these have okay bass and they have a more neutral response. Best overall sound regardless of price, I'm probably gonna put them right here above the ELAC BS41 passive speakers. They're both very small speakers, small enclosure, and so they both don't have a ton of bass. ELAC BS41 may have a little bit more bass, but I think that these may be a little more accurate, you know, somewhere around this, somewhere like this, above or below. I'll leave a link to the speaker leaderboard down in the description, and you can see it right up here. So there is a new category that I created, best on-wall speakers. And I would say that currently these are at the top because of the bass response and the concentric driver, which allows it to work horizontally or vertically without affecting the off-axis response. I will say that looks would have to go to the Heiko, so if looks are more important to you, you may want to check out some of these Heiko Ambient Series speakers here. All right, so there you have it. As you can tell, I'm impressed with this as an on-wall speaker. I think they did a great job of thinking of all the possible issues and trying to resolve as many as they possibly and physically could. Props again to Monoprice, Monolith, and their designers. So that's it. If you guys have any questions, make sure to leave them in the comments below and I'll do my best to answer them. If you like the video, make sure to like, subscribe, ring the bell to be notified when I upload new videos. That's it. Take care. Bye-bye.